My name is Zach Cherney, and I am the Economic and Community Development Liaison with Mybor Realtor Association. So we're kind of changing gears a little bit. We've been talking about tech, we've been talking about resources for you as realtors, but right now we're going to talk about advocacy, community development, how we can make our communities better, because ultimately I think all of you know community matters. People are now choosing their communities. They're choosing where they want to live very specifically. So we're trying to figure out how do we get ahead of the curve and how do we make sure that we're part of the process of making our communities better. So today what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about people and place, where those connections happen and why it matters to you as realtors. So before I start, I'm one of those people that whenever I'm listening to a speaker, I kind of want to know a little bit of background information about them. So I'm going to give you guys 5 little fun facts about me. One, I'm one of 11 children. Yes, I used to live in Shipshewana, Indiana. Anybody here been to Shipshewana, Indiana? Everybody always asks us, are you Amish? I'm like, no, I'm not Amish. And I'm not Catholic either, so my parents always got asked that question. I'm a Wabash College graduate. I studied political science and German. And then my next one, Deutschsprecher. I'm a Deutschsprecher, so I speak German. Any German speakers in the room? Yes? Gut? Wunderbar. And then I'm an arachnophobe. Spiders, or little pieces of Satan, as I call them. Anybody else here like a severe arachnophobe? I am. So that's something you have to know about me. And then I am Hoosier born and raised, though I've lived in a couple different places. One of them was North Carolina. So anyway, those are just 5 little facts about me, but really what I want to talk about is why placemaking and what the heck is it? Placemaking is kind of this buzzword in 2017. A lot of people are talking about it. NAR is talking about it, but we're going to go over what it is and why it matters for you as realtors. So as I mentioned, NAR is really focused in 2017 on placemaking, and this whole initiative, there are grants that are available, and we've actually put out some of those grants. We did one this past year in 2016 down in Brown County. Do I have any Brown County representatives, by the way? And I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, and by the way, while I'm presenting, if you have a question, please raise your hand and ask me. I'm a former educator, so I really enjoy interaction. I like you guys to interact as much as I am. So we have a placemaking program available through NAR, so obviously kind of just giving a little background information. And realtors across the country right now. This is from Michigan Realtors. They're putting out promotional materials. A lot of their realtors are getting involved in these initiatives, so you see kind of what they're doing there. This is an example of a grant that was made possible by from NAR in Chicago and Andersonville. Has anybody here been to Andersonville outside Chicago? Okay, well, the community itself was, for a little bit, had some areas of blight. And they started creating kind of these little sidewalk areas where people could sit down, like almost like a cafe. And they started this whole You Are Beautiful campaign, basically just trying to make the neighborhood better. And then right after that, obviously, now we have a big boom. People are wanting to move there. It's awesome. It's a really cool, vibrant place. So if you guys are in Chicago, I really recommend hitting it up. 2 resources that I just want to give you guys right now is if you want to learn a little bit more about this, we have a report from the public sector consultants, and I'll give this information to you guys more in a little bit. There's a report called Creating 21st Century Communities. That's something that we at Mybor are using right now to try to figure out what do we need to focus on, how can we make our communities better, how are we going to make it a place where people are going to want to live. The other one is a book by Dr. Catherine Laughlin, who has spoken in our region a couple times. She's been in Johnson County. She's also spoken for the GAD Institute, NAR's GAD Institute, which is the Government Affairs Directors. And she has a book called Place Match, and she discusses basically what's the phenomenon that's happening right now, where we have urbanization, but really what we have is we have people that are drawn to communities. They're researching their communities before they even move there. They move there, then they find the job, and she's got statistics. She gives great examples of kind of what people are looking for. So I think, especially for realtors, you guys can get a good idea of, okay, well, I can market this, I can market this, I can market this to my clients. So I'm just going to give you a definition. Notice I said a definition, not the definition. A definition of placemaking. There are many different definitions. There are many different schools of thought on this. But ultimately, at the bottom, I kind of highlighted more than just promoting better urban design. So more than just making the place better, placemaking facilitates creative patterns of use, paying particular attention to the physical, cultural, and social identities that define a place and support its ongoing evolution. So we've heard from different members when clients are going in to move into a neighborhood, they're starting to ask questions about things that maybe in the past they weren't asking questions about. We're noticing that diversity is becoming a huge thing, especially for younger people. Diversity is a big issue. They want to move into a neighborhood where they have that feel. Whether it's in Greenwood or whether it's in Hamilton County, Boone County, wherever it is, they have this desire to live in a community where they feel like there's diversity of opinion, of thought, of everything. So this is from Project for Public Spaces, and that's just one example of what placemaking is. So let's kind of move into what we know. On the left right here, we have some points of things that we know. I think that they're observations that I think all of you would agree with, and then kind of what we don't know. So first, people are choosing their places over employment opportunities. A lot of people have been talking a lot about millennials. Those millennials are just disrupting everything. They're ruining everything, right? I am a millennial, so usually when I'm in the room, everybody's like, oh, millennials, they're awful. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, all right. So, but what we don't know is what are the specific components of placemaking that they're looking for? So if they're looking for place over opportunity, what are the things that they're looking for? What are the things that we can start implementing in our communities to get them to move there? And then place and placemaking are impacting the economy. We know that the economy is being impacted by this. There is a shift. There's urbanization that's happening. But we need to figure out, so the thing that we don't know, though, is how is quality of place impacting site selection and economic growth? So you as real estate or as real estate agents know that when you have a client, similarly with a company, they have site selectors, and they're going out and they're trying to find a community, trying to find a site, a building, whatever, and they're saying, okay, we need to find the right community. Well, now it's impacting their decisions. Even companies are looking at this. The quality of place has an impact on the real estate market. We know that. But maybe what we don't know is what are the housing trends or the data that we're seeing as it pertains to placemaking. So what are some concrete statistics that we can use? And then lastly, Indiana and the central Indiana region needs to implement better, more placemaking strategies, but then ultimately what are examples of what we, especially as realtors, can do. I do want to add one note. The reason why I feel, coming into my board, working with realtors is awesome because I think, I came from economic development. I was the deputy director over in Montgomery County. One of the things I've been really amazed with is that realtors tend to be very knowledgeable about what's happening in the market very quick. And I think it's because your industry is impacted right away by the market. So we know that when the economy is really good, that real estate's doing really well, but when it tanks, you feel it, right? So it's a really good indicator. So you all are very knowledgeable about what's going on in the economy. So that's kind of why, but we're going to move into some of these concrete examples of what are the components of placemaking. So Dr. Catherine Laughlin, she brings in 3 different points. She was in Franklin, Indiana, by the way, and these were the 3 that she really hit on. They were social opportunities. It was kind of, what are the groups, the organizations, neighborhood association, whatever it is. The social opportunities, the aesthetics, we all know now. You definitely know. Sometimes people say, I want brick, or I want this, or I want this. There are different materials. Aesthetics are very important. And then openness. This is an interesting concept. A lot of people now don't want to go to a community where they feel like there's closed doors everywhere to them. They want to feel like they're going to impact it. And what's interesting is that a lot of people think that millennials are all hyped about this, but guess what? Baby boomers are extremely hyped about this too. I think it's interesting because we're moving from, baby boomers grew up in the era where you walked down to your school or to the grocery store, you were part of the community, and then we kind of moved away from there and we were separated by the car for a while, and then now I think what's happening is we're getting back to that desire to be part of the community. But the public sector consultants breaks it into, I would say, a little bit more specific initiatives or areas of focus. We have physical design and walkability. And as we go through this, I'm sure that all of you are saying, yes, we know people want walkability. They want to be near this or that. Multimodal transportation networks, bike trails, trails in general. That is a really important, very, very important component right now. Environmental sustainability, green spaces. People actually are now caring, well, I want more trees. I want to live near trees. Trees are really important. And then we have cultural economic development. I've had somebody ask me, so is there an opera house in Indianapolis? Right? Does anybody here like opera? I'm a huge opera fan, by the way. So if we ever get a really cool opera house here, I'll be going there. Entrepreneurship, a welcoming culture that's, again, we open on openness. Education, you all know this, education is one of the most important factors when someone's choosing a house. And then messaging and technology. Ultimately, how is the community, how are they communicating to their own citizens? So people are now have those apps like, what is it called, Nextdoor or something? There's that app. That's a good example of how a community can start using messaging, you know? So those are just kind of those concrete examples. And I just want to go through just a couple of these. I may not go through all of them, but just a couple. This is from that public sector consultants report, and this was between 2014 and 2016. They did in-depth data analysis on communities across the country. So this was not just one specific community, this was many communities. And these are some of the things that they found, and this is very interesting. So mixed use, walkable downtown developments generate 10 times as much tax revenue per acre, and they save 40% on upfront infrastructure costs. And it's also cheaper when it comes to things like fire and EMT. One of the things that we are trying to kind of help educate people on is that in the Midwest, that density is not a bad word if it's smart density, right? So mixed use development actually yields 10 times as much tax revenue. So when we talk to communities and elected officials, one of the things we're saying is you need to focus on tax revenue yield per acre. That's important, because in the past people thought, well, you know what, we're going to build a cul-de-sac, we're going to have those large lots, and then the houses are going to be really expensive, and then that's going to generate a lot of tax revenue. What we found is if you build more density, you have better affordability. Affordability meaning just it's still at market rate, but more affordable. You actually have a higher tax revenue yield. And then another one is proximity to bus or transit stops. And we found this in Indianapolis. Right now, with the whole discussion that's happening around mass transit in Indy, we've had people going well above listing price specifically for properties that were near transit stops or transit lines. So that's important as well. And then equally, a lot of communities are seeing that green infrastructure, parks, yes, parks are really important as well. Parks or green areas, you have wetlands, water, trails, they have a positive impact as well on the community overall, income and employment levels. Improving school quality, we all know that, that's very important. So those are just kind of some of those numbers and statistics that go with, okay, so how is placemaking or positively impacting the community? How is it also impacting real estate? So those were some very concrete examples. So just kind of moving in, now that we kind of had a little bit of discussion about kind of what people are looking for, one of my favorite spaces is Harvard Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Has anybody ever been there in here? Yes? It is a really awesome place. For me, I think that one of the coolest things about it is, if you guys notice in these images, it's not like Times Square. It's not giant high-rises. You could have that feel even in Indiana. And what's really cool about it is, so everything we talked about, messaging, transit, everything. So they've got, their subway station here. The messaging, there's this really cool little visitor messaging board right here. So right when you get out, there's this little station right there. People walk up to it. There's flyers about music events that are happening. That's so cool. That's such a cool idea. They've got events that go on here. So they do a lot of the programming of the space. Just looking at it, the way that it is, it's very walkable. There's lots of things that are happening. It encourages retail development. A lot of our communities here in Indiana right now are trying to figure out how do we start leveraging our assets to have, better retail development. So if you think of Crawfordsville, Shelbyville, these towns in our region are asking the questions, how do we start leveraging some of these assets and start saying, let's start building a community where it doesn't have to be a giant, bustling metropolis, but it has to be a place where people want to gather, that they want to be, they want to socialize with each other. So that's just kind of an example right there that I like to use. So for me, in economic development, one of the things that I usually when I give this presentation, it's to economic developers. And one of the things they understand is they understand these site selectors. Site selectors are, so let's say, Facebook or Google, whoever. They have a team of site selectors that are going through and they're combing through communities and they're saying, okay, we can go there, we can go there, we can go there. They're looking at different sites. In the past, so I'd say between 1980 and 2010, from the International Economic Development Council, they were really looking at industrial site profiles. They were looking at transportation access, water, sewer protective services, things that are actually pretty similar. So if you think about you as realtors, things that people are looking for. They were looking for, okay, is it close to a good school? Is it close to, you know, main road? Things that you guys are all aware of. But what they found is after 2010, there was kind of a shift. There was a shift with site selectors who started looking at other things like demographics. So now what companies are looking for is a skilled labor availability and basic demographics overviews. They're looking at population trends. They're looking at education levels. And that's really interesting because a lot of the communities in Indiana, I think for a long time, we kind of have this mindset of, you know, the low taxes is good. The tax environment, that's always important. They are going to ask about taxes. But what's even more interesting for companies now is they're not going to invest in a community if they see the population that's dropping. Because for them, that's a huge cost burden. Turnover rates are one of the most expensive things for our companies right now, especially manufacturers. Coming from Montgomery County, whenever I would do BR&E, which is business retention and expansion, I would survey these companies and say, what can we do to make sure you stay in this community? What is the most costly thing that you guys have right now? And every single time it was labor force. The turnover rates are so high right now, and then they just don't have the availability. So that's a huge problem that's going on right now. So this is kind of how demographic shifts, placemaking, people choosing their place, that's how it's all kind of impacting the economy. I pulled some of this data for you, why it matters for you as realtors, why it matters in the real estate industry. And these numbers were interesting to me. So in the first box, we have states with the highest net migrations. So these are the states that people were moving to in 2016. And you have that top 10 list. The next one are the states with the most corporate expansions in 2016. And as you see right here, we have 60% matches up with the net migrations. What's even more fascinating is we have new construction of single-family, single-unit residences. 80% of those states matched up with the net migrations, and then the other two matched up with the corporate expansions. So 100% of those states matched up with those lists right there. So when people say, why does it matter? Well, it matters because, one, corporations are following it. Corporations follow the people. And the homes are being built where the people are. Nashville, Tennessee right now, we were down in Nashville not very long ago, last year, and they were bragging about how they have like 90% of all of the cranes in the entire state of Tennessee are in Nashville right now because they can't build fast enough. And I think that's interesting because developers, investors, they're watching, they're studying, they're looking, they're like, where is the next place that people are going to want to move to? And that's where they're investing. And then the realtors there are definitely benefiting from that. So ultimately, what we're talking about is economic development in 2017 is people-focused and people-driven. And for us, we're probably like, well, yeah, duh. I mean, it's always been kind of that way. Not necessarily. I think for a long time, the success metrics were corporate relocations, corporate expansions. Everybody was following the corporations. Well, the success of a community has to be the companies that are there. Well, that's true, but where are the companies going? They're going where the people are. So that's the communities that can draw on the people are going to be the most successful. And so that's going to be for the next 50 years. Right now, we've got to focus on that. We have to invest in it. So what can we do? So what can we do as realtors? What we do here at MIBOR is we advocate. We talk to elected officials. We talk to your neighborhood associations. We're talking to chambers of commerce. And we're telling them, we're educating them. Lacey Everett, who's in the back, she's part of our team. She and I have given this presentation to various boards across our region, to different counties, different economic development boards. And we're talking to them and we're saying, listen, we need to all get on the same page with this because if we want central Indiana to grow and thrive, which it's growing now, but we're pulling mostly from within our own state, and we're, you know, the rural counties are kind of giving us their people. If we want to really grow, we need to start figuring out how can we become an international brand? How can we get people to say, I really want to move there? The director of Visit Indy said something that was really fascinating to me. He said, everybody here says, well, Indy doesn't have mountains and we don't have oceans. And he said, have any of you ever been to Paris? Paris has a river that runs through it, and it's in the middle of nowhere. Literally. It's flat, it's ugly, but everybody wants to go to Paris. Not everybody, but a lot of people want to go to Paris. So the other thing we can do is get connected. So MIBOR efforts, local organizations. We've got, you know, our Economic Development Council here at MIBOR that's very involved, and they're very aware of these issues, so they're involved. We have arts programs, schools, parks departments. Parents who get involved in their schools, that is a huge thing. When I was a teacher, I noticed the parents that would come in and they were involved. I was like, man, they're making a difference, because parents do make a difference. And then, obviously, ask questions. What can you do for your community? How can we make our communities better? One last thing that I want to put in a little selfish pitch is for the RPAC. We have RPAC event. It's for the reception, and it will be on May 11th, 4 to 6. Tickets $150, $250 for a couple. And you can RSVP to LexFay if you haven't done so already. RPAC is important because that's another way that we're reaching out to those elected officials. It's another way that realtors are getting in with them and saying, hey, listen, we need to change our community, or we need to do this better. So I really highly recommend that you look into that. And then finally, I kind of want to just give a little shout out to my comrades in our department. We have Chris Pryor, Lacey Everett, LexFay, and myself. If you ever want to get involved, you want to get connected, you have questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to one of us. Thank you.